Hi everyone, welcome to our special time every Saturday evening where Ashraf Farid and myself, Roshan Thiran, we speak about the stuff that's happening in Leaderonomics.com and some of the cool latest or greatest articles out there. Hi, I'm Roshan Thiran and Ashraf, welcome to the Leaderonomics.com show, right? Where we talk about all great things Leaderonomics, right? Essentially, Ashraf, what are we going to talk about today?
Okay, so tonight we're gonna talk. Okay lah, see you said the great things about Leaderonomics.com, and then we're gonna talk about your articles. So I like the subtle marketing going on there, Roshan.
Yeah, we talk about because we were supposed to get Bernard, right? But Bernard was a bit shy today, right, or something like that.
See like that, boss. Now he's going to be shy forever. Okay, Bernard, if you're watching, don't worry. Okay, we will work our way there. But anyways, tonight we're gonna check out another couple of Roshan's articles. One is follow-up of last couple of weeks ago actually. Smile like Soichiro Honda, where we followed the development of a really interesting entrepreneur who encountered like a lot of obstacles, and he smiled his way through everything, succeeded in the end, right? And also on that note, another piece about the CEO disease. Also by you. So you want to start?
Sure. Soichiro Honda is a very interesting guy, right? Because he's the founder of Honda Motors, Honda aircraft, Honda everything, right? I mean, essentially the Honda guy, right? Here's a quote: his mind's eye saw joy in everything. He believed that any difficulties or setback faced were temporary and usually not his fault. And this is interesting because one of the things that I love about Soichiro, and I wrote this article called "Smile Like Soichiro." And the article essentially talks a little bit about it's actually it was triggered actually very very interestingly because I was in a meeting and I was smiling. It was an internal meeting with a few employees, and I was smiling, right? And then I was just smiling, right? And when I smile, it's like you just smile, right? And one, right? And later I found out, right? They assumed that I was smiling because both employees sort of came in late to the meeting. But when they came in, I smiled at them, and one of them took it. She believed that when I smiled at her, it means I was like so happy to see her, and great to see the person come in and come to the meeting, right? Now the other person, right, saw it very differently. They saw the smile as he's upset with me, so he's giving me that cynical smile, the sarcastic smile, and it's funny, right? The same smile, right? But two people completely interpreting the smile differently. So that, of course, whenever that happens, that will leave me into my round of, hey, let's research this thing and let's find out about smiles, right? I'm like, well, what's this thing about smiles, and why is a same smile having two effect? And one of the most interesting characters I came in, so I did a whole study on smile, and actually, there's another article I wrote called by a guy who is the most famous for his smiles, which is a guy called Herb Kelleher. So Herb Kelleher is the founder of Southwest Airlines, and he used to be crazy. He would just try to make everyone laugh all the time. So I met him in person in 1999 when he and Jack Roush, I was in GE at that time, and both of them came to speak at this debate, like the Jack versus Herb Kelleher, because Jack was this get things done, I fire you if you fail. No, it's either black or white. There's no gray areas, blah blah blah. And Herb Kelleher, he would dress up like a chicken and go in and make fun of himself and make his employees laugh. He'd go inside a plane as Elvis and play the boarding. When you're boarding aircraft, they always have the boarding announcement. He would play an Elvis song. He would just do stuff, right? Crazy stuff, right? And so the two of them were debating, and I was always thrilled by why Herb Kelleher wanted to make people smile. And if you research his life, he said that the more people smile, the more productive they were. That was his philosophy. But Soichiro Honda was even more interesting because here's a guy that shouldn't have been smiling. So, he was born in 1906. So early in the 20th century, he was born to Mika. His father was a weaver, and his mother was a weaver, Mika, and his father Gihei was a blacksmith, right? And they ran a bicycle repair business, right? Now the thing with Honda is he was always hopeless, right? So when he went to school, he was kind of hopeless. Couldn't really do much, and because he was not wanting to disappoint his parents in school, he would find in the olden days they instead of signing they use this hieroglyphics. He would try and sign his own report card with hieroglyphics. And then one day he got caught, right? He got caught, right? But that didn't stop him from smiling. His father forced him to sit in a corner whole day with no food as punishment because he cheated. And ultimately he had to drop out of school. But he was like smiling. He's like, hey, you know what? Any diploma from school was worth less than a movie ticket. That was his philosophy at that point in time, right? He just had this very positive belief system that whatever bad happened to him, it doesn't matter. Then he went on to work as an apprentice in the store. Then the earthquake of 1923, right? While he was working in this as an apprentice in this car repair shop, right? The earthquake is happening, right? In the middle of the earthquake, he's like, oh, I have to save the cars. So he goes into the garage and drives 3 cars out of this garage that's burning in the middle of the earthquake, right? And the best part is, right, prior to this, he had never driven a car, right? so he was an incredible guy, right? So anyway, but he was always this perpetual optimist, right? Then 1930s happened, the depression, right? He kind of was trying to develop this whole concept of the piston ring, and he was working very hard day and night to try and sell it to Toyota. Toyota was this big company in Japan at that point in time, and of course Honda didn't exist, right? And he finally completed it, this piston ring, sent a sample to Toyota, right? And guess what happened? The engineers laughed at him and told him that these rings don't even come close to the standards that they expect. He continued another 2 years, he kept going and going, and guess what? At the end, right, he just kept smiling and smiling, and finally he got it. He got a small contract with Toyota, right? But it didn't end there, because what happened is he then, ended up World War II, right? He was actually called up for military service. So, but typical, he left everything, joined the military, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure. I think fortunately for him, he was medically examined and he was found to be colorblind. And because he's colorblind, I don't know why there's a requirement for fighting. You need to be colorful or have color vision. But he was actually kicked out of the army and sent back to manufacture piston rings for your Toyota, right? But what happened during the war? His factory was bombed, right? And then he rebuilt the factory again. Again, the factory was bombed the second time. He again rebuilt it, right? And finally, right? He realized that after he rebuilt everything, right, steel was unavailable, right? So he ended up doing like all kinds of funny the point came where he started to because of the Mihawa earthquake, right? After the 2 bombings, right, there was an earthquake that destroyed his factory, right? So again, the third time, right? So first 2 was bombing, the third time was, so now he was just left with nothing, really nothing, right? No opportunity to rebuild back because he just didn't have any money, right? And this is where he realized that many people were using bicycles because people just were poor, right? I mean, they couldn't afford it. Japan was really war torn, right? Post World War II, and you know what he did? He started to realize that, hey, why don't I build a small little engine and put it on top of the bicycle. And this is how Honda Motors really started, right? Because before that, he was making pistons for Toyota. And he didn't have money, right? So he wrote 18,000 bicycle shop owners asking him for help to rejuvenate Japan by being the investors into this new this company, right? And out of 18,000 bicycle owners, 5,000 responded, gave him some money, and that's how the Honda that you know today came about, Kapchai, right? Really. I mean, if you think about Honda, right? Honda started with motorcycles, right? or scooters or whatever you want to call them, right? So that was how Honda started. But can you imagine if you were in his shoes, right? Okay, bomb once, build back. Bomb twice, build back. Earthquake, what are you gonna do? Give up?
I would have given up. I think first earthquake.
I mean, the first bomb, I would have given up. I mean, these 2 bombs and an earthquake, Honda completely wiped out, but he kept going and going and going. And I thought it was incredible. But one of the things as I researched more and more, so Herb Keller's life, Soichiro Honda's life, you start to realize is that actually optimism. And we talked a little bit about that with our last episode. We talked about luck, right? And this year of Chinese New Year, right? We found that lucky people were always lucky. Somehow bad luck would continue. Bad luck people always have bad luck. good luck people always have good luck, right? And you kind of understand. I try to understand why is this, right? And we talked about how you can increase your return on luck the last time, right? With that study on luck. But optimism, right, is one of the reasons why lucky people always get lucky because they're very optimistic. And it started actually in a study in the 1940s with Harvard undergrads, right? Where in the 1940s they did a study and they found that at the age of 20, right? They did studies in the 40s with 20-year-olds students at Harvard University, right? And what they found is that more optimistic students at the age of 65, right? They found that they were still in good health, right? And it was slightly different with people who are pessimistic. So at the age of 65, many of them were dead, right? So this is quite interesting, right? That optimistic people actually live longer, they are happier, and ultimately they're more successful, right? And I think that's part of this thing that Honda had. There's this joy that he had, and you can see that in 1956, he actually presented a standard job description in the if you wanted to work for Honda. So Ashraf, if you wanted to work for Honda in 1956, there's a job description, and part of it, right, you have to pass is that every single employee must learn the 3 joys. Okay, so the first joy was producing and manufacturing good quality cars. The second joy was when a buyer purchases a Honda product. The third joy was the joy of the buyer. Now you must delight in these 3 joys, then only you can work in Honda. Which I thought was very, very interesting.
So does that mean that they want you to actually they want the workers to buy the products, or they want the workers to share the joy of the purchaser?
The workers should share the joy of the purchaser.
Okay.
So and I one of the things, I was reading a lot of books on psychology on optimism, and there's this book written by Elaine Fox on optimism. She wrote about Rainy Day. I think it's a Sunny Day and Rainy Day. I can't remember a book, but I read it a couple of years ago. And one of the things she says is this: optimistic people accept the world as it is and believe in the innate goodness of humankind. This is in contrast to the mind of the pessimist, which is infused with negativity and convinced that their problems are beyond their control and will never go away. So I guess a good question to ask you in this age of pessimism, I guess in this 2020 and 2021, the age of coronavirus, the age of pandemic, the age of lockdowns, the age of when are we going to start back work, or when are we going to go back to school, or what's happening now, or even if you're a Malaysian, even worse, right? When you read stories of what's happening. Yeah, when you see what's happening to Malaysia Kini and the nonsense that's happening in our country, right? And the sad things that so this the supposedly people who are in charge of taking care of us are embedding in, right? You start to say, is this an age of pessimism, and should we just give up? And that happened in the 1980s, when our former Prime Minister twice came into power, right? And people started to migrate to Australia and say, oh, that's the end of Malaysia. But the others stayed back and said, there's going to be an optimism. The optimistic people are the ones that are going to be taking the country forward, not the pessimistic ones just going to give up, right? So I think it's a lesson for all of us, I guess. We can be really pessimistic about the situation we have, both globally in terms of the pandemic and the state of the country and all the other things. But I think we can learn some great lessons from people like Herb Kelleher and Soichiro Honda. That there is.
I've got a question, boss.
Sure.
So you seem to, so far you've mentioned optimism and pessimism, and I think that many times people who you might view as pessimistic, right? They will not see themselves as pessimistic. They will see themselves as realistic. Do you think there is a middle ground between optimism and pessimism, or no? It's just one or the other.
I think there is a time for everything. I think, and this is what I learned from a very old a friend of mine, my old boss, actually, my first boss, Mike Petrucelli, and we should get him on the show one of these days. We should bring Big Mike into the show and share. And he told me, and this is also something that Jack Welch kept reinforcing. He said that you must have the candor of understanding reality, meaning reality can be must be real, meaning you must understand what reality is. And I think many times when we talk about optimism, people want to brush off reality. Because when you talk about optimism, people think that, oh, everything is like perfect, we can just do it, and it's like I know sometimes you say I have humor like Iron Man, I'm sorry, Captain America, and I'm boring as Captain America, but sometimes you have that over optimism that's not real, and this is called blind optimism. It's what I term as blind optimism, because that is not that's not real. Because you say, okay, I'm one man and I'm going to take on this whole world and I'm just going to crush everything and I'm just going to do it. And the 80s were littered with the Rambo type movies where Sylvester Stallone or whoever it is, who just one man army and conquer the world. I call that blind optimism now, because I don't think that's the real. I don't think that's the optimism. People who succeed like Soichiro Honda and Herb Kelleher. I think what they have is optimism and realism, right? They are realistic enough to understand that this is the state of the world, right? Okay, we are realistic enough to understand that this is the state of our country, this is the state of what's happening, and the coronavirus is real. It's impacting business. It's causing us to lose business and all these things, right? That's reality. But that doesn't mean that optimism means not staring reality and accepting reality. I think it's about accepting reality, but it's also about not accepting that reality is going to translate to misfortune, right? It's about saying that reality can be diverted to something positive, right? And I think that's where there's a difference between blind optimism, which is the rah superhero, I can do this, and the stupidity, right? Who says, and you see a lot of that in it's Berlin Wall, we can break it down, in 88, 87, people, let's just go break the wall, and somebody will just shoot you on the wall. That's it, you're dead, right? Versus the look, the reality is the Berlin Wall is there, but we keep progressing, we keep fighting, we keep pushing and pushing. Either one day the wall will come down, and true enough, 1989 the wall came down, right? And you see that the same thing happened for 60 years in Malaysia, right? People said, one day we will see a change, and it happened. Now people give up and say, no point changing, because
the change came, but
it went back, right? But that doesn't mean you give up, right? And so the reality is that the change is going to be painful and slow. People thought that one day everything just changes, Rome just changes, right? The reality is that there are many other things that need to be changed, and it's going to take some time. And there's hearts and minds and soul, and all these things that need to be changed, in addition to the changes that need to happen. And I think a lot, and this is where I kind of think about the next article which I wrote some time ago, right? Which is about the CEO disease, or what I call the low star, the lack of self-awareness, right? And if you think about it, right, I can be very optimistic that I can do certain things, but my optimism, right, can be grounded on reality, or can be grounded on superficial thinking, or what we call superfluous, or how you pronounce that word. My English not very good.
We get it. We all get it. Okay.
But when you say, look, my business is now 1 million. By the end of the year, I'm going to be 100 million, right? And you don't really have a plan, and you say we just do it, and you just like a Rambo, you want to just shoot, and somehow the bullets will hit and you succeed, right? That's what I call stupid optimism, right? It's blind because you don't understand reality, but it's really stupid because you're not going to do it, right? That's not optimism, That is more of like a suicide mission, right? Because you're going to fail, right? I think where optimism is that, look, I know the chips are down, and here's the reality. And here is all the 10 different obstacles that we have to overcome to get to this goal. Okay, how do we take care of obstacle 1? We just keep going, and when we do it, okay, that's great. Now obstacle 2, obstacle 3, but we're optimistic that we'll get to the end goal, right? And that's why when the factory burned down, and the factory got bombed again the second time, and when the factory got destroyed by the earthquake, right? His optimism was that at the end of the day, I'm going to succeed. And Soichiro kept moving there. And I think part of it is that reality of knowing who you are, right? Because you got to know, and this is where self-awareness is very, very critical, right? If you know who you are, and if you know the problems, then you're able to succeed. One of the most favorite quotes I have is a quote by this guy Colin Powell. And Colin Powell is this big, great general in the US. He wrote a couple of books on leadership, right? But what I like, one quote he always says is, the day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day you stop leading them. And there's this book written by Goldman, Boyatis, and McKee called Primal Leadership, and they call this, they refer to this disease called the CEO disease. And he says the CEO disease is a information vacuum around the leader, created when people withhold important and sometimes unpleasant information, right? And what is this? This is basically where you see a lot of companies, right? Especially the leaders, they're the last to know what's happening in the company, because none of the soldiers want to tell you the problems, right? So you remember, optimism is knowing all the problems,
Okay.
but being
Okay.
optimistic enough to say, hey, we know we have problems, we know the hand that's dealt with us, but how do we continue working towards where we want to go, and be optimistic enough to know that we can get there, right? Overcoming one hurdle at a time. Now, when you don't know where you are and you try to be optimistic, right, then you're going to fail because you have no sense of reality. You have no sense. You have the CEO disease, which is lack of information of things around you, right? And so and this is where Colin Powell says the day the soldiers stop bringing you the problems, it's the day you stop leading them, right? They have either lost confidence that you can help them or concluded that you do not care, right? And the reality is that no one really likes bad news about themselves or their company, their leadership or their company. But the problem is that when you're not self-aware leaders and you don't accept feedback and you don't seek it out, right? At some point in time, right, you will not understand what the reality on the ground is. And because you don't understand the reality of the ground, you will never be able to have the right kind of optimism. You have what we call blind optimism. You say, yeah, I'm confident because you know why? No? You know why they're optimistic? Because in the past they were successful. So they're confident they're successful now, but they don't realize something important. They don't have enough of a sense of what reality is. You see, here's reality. Here's where you want to go, right? Or here, right? So I need to move from reality to here. But if you have no sense of reality, you think reality is here. You're going to make plans from here to here. But reality is down here. And because you're down here, you don't make the right foundation that is needed to get to the achievement of your plan, right?
Okay, so I have a question. So it's almost these people, the CEOs who have this disease, right? Do they know they have it, or are they just completely ignorant?
Yeah, so most of the time, CEOs know it initially. You see, you're very aware as an individual contributor. So Ashraf, you as the editor of Leaderonomics.com, you know everything that's happening about Leaderonomics.com. And then you get promoted. Now you're head of enterprise. So now you have Leaderonomics.com and you know a bit about it. And sometimes you hear about from the editor, whoever. Then you become CEO of a corporate business. And before long, you're CEO of Leaderonomics, the whole group. And that includes India and all the different countries that we're in. And as you go up, right, you think you're getting all the information, but at some point in time, people start to, decide that maybe you don't need to have as much information as you need. Now you start to look at the situation. You're pretty optimistic because the information is based on what you know. It sounds very optimistic to achieve. So
Yes.
I think I can get to 15 million, right? I'm 10 million now. I can get to 15. But the reality is there are problems there that even 10 million, which is what you did last year, may not be achievable this year, right? But because you don't know that, you think, okay, my growth part shows me every year I grow, X%, so it should be fine. But the reality is because you're unclear about the problems. And so usually, right, unless the CEO goes out there and seeks information. And the problem is many times the leadership team, your own leadership team, tries to block you from that information, right? Because nobody wants to notice the reality. The reality is, let's say you run something, right? There's always going to be problems. Now, if constantly, right, let's say you report to I don't know who, right? Okay, whoever's your boss, and you report to that person. If the boss keeps coming in and saying, Ashraf, what's happening here? What's happening here? At some point in time, you're like, hey, I let me handle this. Like, and you sort of want to manage your own problems, and you want to say only unmanageable problems you want to bring up. But because that happens at some point in time, because of complexity. Now think about this: you are just one division. If the business has 10 divisions, 20 divisions, 50 divisions, whoa! Imagine the kind of complexity and problems that is not escalating, and the unawareness of the leadership team, right? So the leader needs to constantly go down and understand this. And one of the things that I say is that, and also sometimes it's sometimes things that are not just inside your company. Sometimes it's things that are outside your company. I'll give you an example. There are many taxi drivers in the world, but none of the taxi drivers came up with Uber, right?
Right.
There is many hotels specialists, the Marriott, the Sheraton. I mean, these are and some of these guys, some really smart guys running these companies, right? But none of them came out with Airbnb. Why?
They were the problems, right?
But
They were the
yeah, you think about it, they are very clever, right? So you see, as a CEO of a company, right, you are very good in what you are doing, your business. But sometimes, and here's what's interesting, sometimes you're playing you're playing football in this field, right? Somebody is starting a new game called, I don't know, foot golf or something else on another field next to you, and more people are leaving your game to watch this other game, and you don't realize, you keep playing your game and playing your game because you say, I still got the crowds, but after a while suddenly you realize, hey, what's happening, right? And the game started playing, and you're so busy executing your own game that you don't realize there's a new game in town, and the game is taking over your game, right? And to me, that is the classic sort of issue that is out there, lah. There's a very interesting video, which if I have time later, I'll try and show you, to prove my point. But hyper awareness is another issue that happens all around us. And you know what hyper awareness? Hyper awareness is the ability to see dots, this dot, this dot, this dot, and then connect these dots. So many CEOs and many leaders, I wouldn't just say CEOs, right? We are so busy building our own business that we don't see the little dots that are being created for a new field, right? That on the side, right? And that's the bigger issue, right? And part of it is this thing called the Johari Window. Have you heard of the Johari Window?
Yeah, I think we have a slide of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's the Johari Window. Yeah. So when you see do you understand the Johari Window?
Pretend I don't, because I actually don't.
Oh, you don't. Okay, very good. So let me sort of explain the Johari Window to you, lah. So the Johari Window is actually very simple. It's if you look at the window, right, there are 4 windows here, right? Now the first window is called the open self. Now, Ashraf, imagine your window, right? I know you're a guy, I think, right? You wear spectacles. I think you enjoy certain things and so on. So these are things that it's known to you, but it's also known to others, right? So this is what we call the open self. Everybody knows this about you, right? You wear specs, you're an editor at Leaderonomics.com, and so on and so forth. Now, there's another, if you go at the bottom of it, it's called the hidden self. And the hidden self is unknown to others. That means I don't know your secrets, So Ashraf has some secrets, right? Some deep, dark secrets that nobody knows except Ashraf, right? And these are what we call the hidden self. So other people don't know, but you know, right? So you see at the top, it's known to yourself, but it's unknown to the others. Now, here's what's very interesting. There are some things about Ashraf that is known to others, but not known to you. I had a boss in GE who liked to, he had this expression on his face when he farted, and he would and we all could hear him and see it. Okay. He did it in such a way that he thought he was, right? But we all knew certain things, and then you see this some behaviors. Sometimes people behave in certain way. They don't know that they're behaving in a certain way, but everybody, that's Ashraf lah. That's Mili lah. That's this person lah. Everybody else knows it, but the person itself is unaware of their behavior. See, and that's what is unknown to self, but known to others. And then there's the last part, which I'm reading a real good book on now, the unconscious self, right? These are behaviors that you don't know why it happened to you. And the more I read this in psychology, the more interesting I find is that a lot of our early childhood behaviors, whether we had security, we felt very secure with our parents, results in our behavior, towards relationship in our 20s and 30s. And we don't understand why do we act in such a way. And why do we do that? But a lot of it is what we call the unconscious self, that you don't know, others don't know, and is deeply unseen by others. And the idea of the Johari Window, and Johari, by the way, is not a Malaysian guy called Johari that came up with it. And unfortunately, Ashraf, I apologize to Malaysians who think that Johari came up with it. But it's actually 2 guys, one was named Joe, and the other one was named Harry. So that's how Joe and Harry decided.
You know what? It's a good framework. So never mind. Never mind.
So Joe and Harry were that lah. But I want to ask you something, Ashraf, and I don't know whether our producer Sashi can find this video of the invisible gorilla. But have you ever seen the video of the invisible gorilla?
I have.
You have, right? And you tell us a bit about that video.
Well, I watched. Okay, it's a video where they've got a bunch. I forgot the details of it already. So Roshan, you step in whenever I'm rambling. So they tell you to focus on something else. I think basketball players or something like that.
Yeah.
And the whole time there's actually a gorilla dancing in and amongst them. And because you're so absorbed with watching the game, you never notice the gorilla.
Yes.
But then
absolutely.
when you notice the gorilla, you're like, oh man, it's been there the whole time.
Yes. So and this is why it's so very interesting, right? Is because when we are and this is part of the LOSA disease, right, or the CEO disease, as many people call them, right? Part of it is that we tend to think that at the end of the day, right, that the gorilla is exactly a metaphor for life, right? So you see, two groups are playing basketball, right? And one group is playing basketball, and they are sort of one is wearing white color, the other one is wearing I forget what color they were wearing, but basically they wear their black and white, right? So one is wearing black and white, and then the gorilla comes in, and as the gorilla comes in, the gorilla is wearing black, and he starts playing, and suddenly that team has an extra person, but you don't notice it. But here's where it gets very interesting. As the gorilla starts eating up one person after another, right?
Okay.
So the gorilla starts eating up, one person, and the gorilla eats another person up. Suddenly, the team that is playing basketball, the white team, suddenly has not enough players because all the players are disappeared, right? And this is exactly what's happening in real life, right? In real life, we have many people not realizing that gorillas out there, right, that are going to eat your business, that's going to eat your company, that's going to eat your industry, right? And the gorillas are so obvious, everyone can see that. But when you watch the video, you don't realize the gorillas there because it's so blended, and you're so focused on counting because the video tells you something, right? They ask you to count the number of basketballs that are the team in white is doing, right? And so because of that, they are so fixated on doing that they miss everything. And that's what the CEO disease is all about. It's really about, leaders need to be a little bit more aware that things are happening around them. They need to be hyper aware about things that are out there, and they need to start figuring out how to zoom in on those things and connect the dots so that these gorillas, you can notice them early, and then you also can bring your white gorilla in, right? So if you have a white gorilla,
like, so again, right, it's like that lack of hyper awareness. I'm sure it happens at every level of the organization, right? But if it happens to me, when I don't know what I don't know, someone above me can look at me and say, Ashraf, you're messing up this part of your job, etc. But when the CEO is at the top of the company and he doesn't know what he doesn't know, then what does this person do?
Yeah. So so your question is the person below the CEO, right?
Me below or someone in middle management or whatever, there's always someone above them that could point out their flaws. But when the person at the top has that flaw, who's going to point it out to that person?
So that's where the company disappears, That's where okay. No, but there's two problems here. One is the person at top can see the problem, but he's blocked by the middle management and so on from executing the change that needs to happen. That's one big problem in companies. The second problem is the whole company can see they need to pivot, but the man at the top is so comfortable that they, or the woman, whoever is leading that they refuse to change. I'm going to show the CEO disease video. Let's watch this and let's see how this is a CEO that refuses to change.
Steve, come, wear your mask, Here, take one.
Emily.
Yeah?
Roberto's infected.
Hey, boss, here's his file.
Oh no. This hasn't happened in decades. The last time this happened, the infected person had to be terminated. Let's take a look at his case file. Name, Roberto Xavier. Age, 67. Height, 1.75 meters. Weight, undisclosed. Symptoms, in denial of the real state of business and is not open to criticism or bad news. Has too many cronies who won't be critical of his performance. and lacks authenticity when leading others. Diagnosed with CEO disease.
Roberto! Don't worry. We're gonna save you!
Roberto, you've got the CEO disease. The only antidote is if you generate self-awareness. You've got to be conscious of your strengths while acknowledging what you still have yet to learn. Now, if you keep this up, it could prove to be detrimental to not only you, but the company too. You don't want to end up like the last victim of the CEO disease, right? The Johari Window comprises of the open self, what others know about you and which you know too. The blind self, what others can see about you but you can't see. The hidden self, what others don't know about you but you do. And finally, the unknown self, what others don't know about you and neither do you. The best way to shrink your blind self is to get constant feedback. We all have blind spots, and if we can learn what they are, we become better leaders. Roberto, if you won't listen to us, you shall be quarantined. Or worse, terminated.
Jane. No, I don't need no self-awareness. I think you all delusional.
Roberto, you leave me no choice. The antidote, please.
Okay. Self-awareness. Here I come.
Okay, I thought that was Colonel Sanders in there, from.
At first I was laughing at the acting, but actually, boss, I missed the office lah.
Yeah, we all that's a lot of our acting has much to be desired. But again, when our employees are all we don't have paid actors and it's all our employees. It's a different cup of tea. But I think the point is there, many CEOs don't want to. I mean, exactly your point, right? Many of them don't want to. Don't want to be self-aware because it's very uncomfortable, right? Because when you're self-aware, you realize your shortcomings, you realize there is a gap, and it ties into that smile piece, where we talked about optimism, because you can only have real, genuine optimism. Authentic optimism can happen when there's a clear sense of reality, right? So a lot of this optimism that people talk about, the hype. If you feel it, you can walk on water, you can do shit, you can do all these things, right? I mean, a lot of it is what we call blind optimism, and it's if you Google the term blind optimism, there's a whole bunch of research on it, because a lot of research has gone into optimistic people are healthier, but they also have a sense of reality. The really optimistic people, because you can only you see, if you have blind optimism, after 3 or 4 times blind optimism, you die, or you would have been dead, falling down a ditch, because you say, no problem, I can jump through 7-story buildings and reach the other side. At some point in time, your blind optimism will cause you to die, right? So the ones that actually survive and then they say, they're at 60, are the ones that have optimism but have realism also. And that's why I think that the smiling comes hand in hand with what we call self-awareness. And for CEOs is a very dangerous game to have lack of self-awareness. Or any leader. I mean, as soon as you manage people, you need to have some form of self-awareness.
So I really need to ask you, boss, in the case of Soichiro Honda, because as an outsider, obviously I don't have a picture of the situation, right? But just from your description of what happened to him and what he continued to smile through, to me, if you just give me those facts, right, it sounds like he was delusional, like he had superfluous optimism. So you're certain that he did in fact see reality and accept it?
No, you think about it, right? Okay, so if he is delusional, right, when he come, okay, forget the third time, when his factory gone, he was making piston rings, right? And he must have come to a point that saying that, okay no hope already, the factory is gone, right? Toyota itself, probably at that point in time, he didn't have money to raise again for a new factory, right? And he must have been walking around and like, oh my goodness, I'm dead. But then he sees everybody using bicycles, and he says, can I make the bicycle faster for them, right? And this is where you see the reality is he's doing exactly that. He's looking at the dots, right? Nobody's driving cars anyway. So even if I if I do the piston ring factory, I'm not sure how many orders Toyota is going to order. So the reality, he's grounded in reality. The reality is everybody uses bicycle. Now, if I can make their bicycles a bit like a car, maybe I have an opportunity there, right?
Okay.
And suddenly it's like, I can build a small little engine that can be powered by bicycles. I can do that, but I have no money. So then I'll write a letter to all the bicycle shops. You give me funding lah. You give me some money, and then I'll give you them for free for X number, and then essentially become my early investor lah, right? But this all grounded in reality. He didn't write to the government of Japan or to write for a grant to some, like, let me write to Hitler or somebody like non-existent to ask for help to get a grant for his bicycle. He wrote to bicycle repair shop bicycle shop owners, right? Because he saw that their business was thriving, right? So I mean, all of it points to a point where it's grounded in reality. He's hyper aware. He's aware of what's happening, and he's taking advantage of what's happening. A person who's delusional will say, "We can do it. We can do it." I don't know where he's going to raise the money, but he'll have this belief that he's going to raise money. He's going to still think about piston rings. He's not delusional that he's three times his piston ring factory gone. He didn't build a piston ring factory after that. No, he ended up building a bicycle, motorized thing for gadget for the bicycle, right? And I think that is what is interesting, right? I see a couple of questions from Mr. K7. If you know you boss has your boss, I guess, see your disease, you can try to tell him, but he doesn't see it. Is there a way to make him see it? I think it's hard, right? I mean, I think you can put all the facts out there, but if somebody doesn't want to see it, but I think the best way is to have as many people as possible go to the boss and tell him this happening, this is reality ground. And as more and more people do that, right? See, the problem is when one person do, you can always say that's an outlier. But when 50, 60% of the company comes to you and says, hey, boss, then you start to say, okay, maybe I'm missing something, so that's probably, I would say, get as many of your colleagues together with you to have those dialogues with whoever, like that whichever leader that you think.
Can I answer also, boss?
Sure, go ahead.
If I answer, then you marah or something, then you assume first. Okay. So, but for me, you wanna protect the business because you care for the company. But if the CEO is a truly delusional person, I think it pays to protect yourself in the process as well. And because of that, right, if the CEO is that delusional, even if you bring all your colleagues in to tell him, one, it's not going to change anything, and second, it can jeopardize their careers. So one thing I've seen work is when you bring in an external party who is seen as an expert in this, right? So like in your case, I'm sure you've spoken to many CEOs from other companies, and then they listen to you when they won't listen to their own employees, something like that.
I think that's a possibility now. I hear a little bit of an echo. Okay, let me see if this is better. Oh, we still got an echo. Okay, never mind. No, I hear a little echo. Okay, now it's good. So I think maybe Ashraf, you've got a couple of devices on, but okay, to answer your question, I think you're spot on. I think there are a lot of external folks that occasionally will be good for the business, but I think in the long term, right? I mean, honestly, I think if you look at if I'm in a situation, and it happened to me before, and I look at a company, right, and I looked at the organization, and I said, this is not going to change, right? So I was in a big organization, and when I met the CEO a number of times, and we had breakfast even, and at some point in time, I said, look, I don't think it's going to change, and I realized that the behavior was cascading down to the leadership of the whole organization. At some point, I said, look, I think it's time for me to leave. No, I think that's the brave thing to do. Is that if you think that the leader is delusional, people should leave. And when two things can happen, two things can happen, because sometimes delusional leaders are not really delusional. No? It's actually the employees that are delusional, right? Because you see that with Steve Jobs. You see that with people hated it when he was trying to whip Apple to ship in both in the 80s and also in the 90s, right? They hated it and they all left, but ultimately he succeeded, right? Because he was very clear on what he was going. So sometimes you look at people like Galileo, the heretics of the world, right? All the heretics, right, were actually geniuses, right? But they were just way before their time. They had visions that nobody could understand, right? Now, if that vision doesn't kind of coincide or align with yours, leave, right? Because there are other companies. Now, at the same time, if the person is really delusional, the company will sink. At some point in time, you don't. So it's safer for you. I mean, you can say, yeah, I want to protect my career by being externals. But to me, the best way is leave, right? Why stay in an organization when you think the leadership is delusional? Now, two things happen. The leader will realize that this delusional and say, why are people leaving, and change. Or the leader will say, no, the people are delusional. We're still going to go. And like, that's a Steve Jobs. That's a Jeff Bezos. You know, look at the number of people who worked for Jeff Bezos. He fired, I mean, the leadership team came to change every 2 years, right? Because people are like, this guy's crazy. But look, 20 years later, Amazon is the greatest thing in the world, right? Same with Elon Musk, right? Oh, Tesla is rubbish. Look at that, right? Look at what happened last year, right? With Tesla stock, right? So to me, that and you have to be very clear, no? I think the first question you ask is not whether the leader is delusional. The first question is, am I delusional? Am I not seeing something that the leader is seeing? Now, if really you realize that I can see it, but the leader cannot, and I cannot communicate, nothing happens, I think you can get externals to come in. But you know that behavior is not going to change. Because if they cannot see trend A, they're not going to see trend B, they're not going to see the next thing, and then the company at some point in time is just going to go, right? And that's what happens with second generation, third generation, right? The leaders built it, and then they couldn't see the next wave. And then the kids continued whatever was taught to them. And at some point in time, the company collapsed, right? Because they were doing the same thing. They were playing the same game in the same field, right? Yeah, Ashraf, go ahead. Sorry, you were saying something?
Just the second, third generation, the Kodaks and the Nokias of the world, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. And you know, I think Sashi says maybe some leaders are afraid of listening to feedback, especially when starting out, as they don't want to appear influenced. Yeah, no, I think so. That's a very true point. But you know, I think what is even more important is to have a sense of reality. And this is the hardest part, lah. The hardest part, I think, lah, for me also. Even in GE, when I was in JE, one of the things I struggled with is the sense of reality, right? And at some point in time, when I looked at it, I said, look, this you know, I couldn't understand how everything was being held together. And I started to question, I have a lot of questions, right? And I think, you know, fast forward 10 years and you're like, okay, some of the questions are now being answered. I think my sense of what was, you know, to come was not completely inaccurate, right? And I see another question from a CEO or his perspective. How do you know if your employees just don't like you, or is it really a blind spot? But I don't know. I think you got to take all perspective in, whether they like you or whether they not. You take in the feedback and then you check. And I do this, you know. I mean, personally, I do this, right? When somebody gives feedback, I always explore that feedback a little bit, and then I say, okay lah, this person not so clever, or this person very clever, or this person maybe got part one, but maybe not part two, maybe lack of information. You know, you start to say, and then let's educate. If cannot, then maybe not so clever, or maybe more clever than you, right? So you never know, right? And I always say this previously, lah. Sometimes that, you know, you must always say that you are the stupidest person in the room, because when you do that, right, you always will be the most curious and you ask the most questions. And I think that's why people who are optimistic smile. And I think maybe we'll take a quick break to just watch this video on smile, because I know we wanted to show this last week also. I mean, the last show. But it's been a very engaging conversation. Ashraf, you are excellent talker or listener or whatever else. But let's keep smiling like Captain America, and let's keep going.
Okay, let's go. Let's do it.
I'm so nervous. I wonder if we get a project or not.
We should know by now what's taking them so long.
Yeah.
Hey guys, bad news. We didn't get the contract. But not to worry. Next week we'll have a meeting to assess our pitch and see how we can improve.
Did they say why?
Sadly, no. But hey, chin up. We've got other projects and contracts to work on.
Don't you just hate how positive she is?
Yeah, man. But I heard that's how she got to senior executive. Did you know that she started as a receptionist?
Are you serious?
It all started 6 years ago.
Thank you.
Kat,
Yes, boss.
you know, Kat, I know it's the long weekend, but I just received a call from Dynatech and they want us to pitch for this long-term training project. I need these slides by Monday. It's my only chance to present to the CEO.
Sure, boss. I'll get it done right away.
It was a long public holiday weekend, but that didn't stop Khatijah. She worked through the weekend, and come Monday, the pitch was ready.
Good morning, boss.
Hey, morning!
Here you go. All your files updated.
Wow, thank you. You're a lifesaver.
No problem.
Since Roshan saw potential in Khatijah and admired her positive attitude, he decided to promote her to junior executive. Then she was put in charge of a training program for the company's staff. Khatijah planned a 3-day training program. The turnout was terrible. Roshan, unhappy with the turnout, talked to Khatijah and told her to keep pushing. And so she did, all with a smile. She didn't let one disaster phase her at all. She took his criticism and executed another team training program, but this time with
Doesn't she get tired though? I'd be tired if I had to smile every day.
It works for some people. It definitely worked for her. Maybe we should try smiling, shall we?
What did you guys do this time?
Nothing?
Okay, we looks like we lost the sound for a little while just now. But I mean, I think the essence of it we spoke about that I think the more optimistic, and this is not blind optimism, right? It's about realistic optimism, you know, or really optimistically, really. I don't know how you pronounce it, but to be real, right? So you know, it was a question from Norizan Suryani. What's the sign someone has the disease? I think when you, huh?
All yours. Question is all yours.
Yeah, and jump in, Ashraf. You know, if you feel, but I think one of the signs is that when you look at the business and you see many, especially when leaders, right, they seem very frustrated, they seem confused, they seem like agitated about, and they keep getting agitated, right? And you know, part of leadership is to have that calmness and that ability to exude calmness. I mean, of course, authentic leaders, sometimes you see them angry, you see them sad, you see all kinds of it. But when you see it in a constant, you see there's a constant flow of agitation, a constant flow of irritation and frustration and flustered. You know, when these guys are flustered, you can kind of see that, hey, you know, maybe there is lack of understanding. Now, the other big sign, I think, is when people keep brushing off feedback. If you know everyone comes to you and talks to you and so on. Now, there can be two possibilities. There, one is really the leader doesn't want to know because they're very clear, or the leader is in that sense ignorant and overconfident, and this is what I call blind optimism. They're blindly optimistic in their own, that they don't want to understand the reality on the ground. So there are a couple of signs that you can see that as a team leader, right? When you feel that you're out of control, when you feel that the plan is going haywire, you know, then you got to start to understand what's reality, right? Because when you have a grasp of reality, then you can start to say, okay, how do I do step 1, step 2, step 3? But when you have no sense of reality, and reality keeps changing every day, right? Then you are in trouble, right? Because you don't have a clear understanding of what things are as it is, right? So I think that's very important. So thanks for the question, Norizan.
Boss, if I can just add in a bit. You mentioned that one sign that CEOs have this is when a general has this is when their troops no longer bring them information, right?
Mm.
And you talked about why sometimes it's because when they do bring them information, the general just brushes it off. But for me, and okay lah, not to body guys, I don't really like to body. But Roshan, I use Roshan as an example. I have no issues bringing him feedback, and even if he brushes me off, I don't care. I will come again with it. And for me, it comes down, even if he tells me that all my advice is crap, as you said, you did your calculations, Ashraf is stupid. I'm not going to listen to him. I'm fine with that. Because to me, it's the ego lah. I don't sense an ego from Roshan. So if he says no, the sense that I get is that it's not because he's trying to protect himself. It's because he believes that it's wrong lah. It's just wrong. That I am delusional. And then it comes down to me whether or not you trust the leadership enough to know more than you when it comes to things like this. Yeah.
Yep.
So
no, I mean, and you know, I think the same will hopefully be for you one day, right? When you come to a point of leadership, you will, right? I mean, because you know, to me, it's like this: you will engender trust. I mean, it goes back to trust, right? If you feel that you're in a place where you're secure and safe, right, and you can do stuff, people sort of are not worried to give feedback, right? At the same time, and this causes the you know, one of the biggest needs. When Google did a study 5 years ago on why teams are very successful, they call it Project. You can Google it. It's called Project Aristotle, right? And he says the number one reason why teams are high performing is that they have this psychology of safety. They feel safe where they work, right? And then safety essentially is I'm safe enough to give feedback. I'm safe enough to say no, right? Because sometimes you know you have to safe enough for people to shout at each other and not feel upset about it. Not shout out, but basically say, look, no, yes, whatever, go away, don't disturb me now, come back later. You know, and people feel comfortable about this. I think that's where you have a great environment. I mean. So I know we're almost up on the hour, Ashraf. Your final thoughts and your insights for today. What did you pick up from lessons of today?
Okay. First off, thank you for pointing out how Soichiro Honda was probably not delusional, because I really thought that he was super delusional and he really just got lucky. But yeah, you're right. He actually looked around. He connected the dots. So I'll be interested to see what dots you connect in the near future. That's a plug for Leaderonomics Digital. What else did I take away? I'm a slow thinker, boss. I need time to digest.
No worries. So you know what, people just go to leaderonomics.com. You can read Ashraf's writing. He will slowly think about it and give you some insights. Or you can read all the articles that are out there, 6,000 over articles. And you know, we've got sorry, go ahead.
I just want to shout out if our producer could pop up some quote. For me, when it comes to articles, it can get a bit boring because a lot of people say the same thing. And sometimes, Roshan, you said it once, right? You're not selling the product or the service, you're selling the experience. So we've got this author called Willem Gauss. Willem Goose, yeah.
I see the panties thing coming out, huh?
Hey man, like when I read that line from him, right, I had to keep reading the rest of the article. And the article, it makes sense. So visit l.com. Willem.
We'll get William on the show next week then, huh? Let's try to get William on the show. I'm sure he will. And this is a South Africa friendly time, so I'm sure he'll be able to jump in. So William, I think if you haven't read the article, go read this. What's the article about? William Go's article.
The article is about business ideas that you have when you're drunk. So that's why he says that sometimes it can really mess up your mind.
Okay,
so I guess if you come and Willem is here, he'll try and get Roshan to take off his bra and his panties as well.
But you know, I felt very offended. You know, just to let everyone know, William wrote an email to Ashraf and said, Ashraf, I'm good friends with Roshan. And then Ashraf's like, what? You know this guy? You two are so different. And you know, Roshan's so unhumorous like Captain America, while you are humorous like Deadpool. And then he shared that email with me. I'm like, oh my goodness. Wait. You're sharing the whole company. You shared that. You
This
shared that.
is like the smile. It's like the smile, boss. Remember the smile at the beginning you mentioned? Like people, one smile, two people interpret different one. It was a compliment.
Exactly,
But
exactly. And this today at dinner, I told my daughter, there's this guy Ashraf, which I'm gonna go on live afterwards. He wrote this, he called me Captain America, and he said, "Do you think Captain America is humorous?" Then he's like, "Captain America is not funny. You are not funny." And I'm like, "Okay, I guess maybe you're right. Like, I'm not as humorous as my daughter doesn't think I'm humorous. Like, there goes. So Captain America, I am right. I'll don myself maybe I'll do Captain Malaysia lah. All right. Okay, we'll be so with that I will should we end with a little Leaderonomics.com video and to everyone, happy weekend, everyone. Ashraf, your final thoughts for today. Happy weekend. And Kyrie says hi.
Hi, Real. You have the same name as my cousin. That's kind of small world, huh? You're not my cousin, right? Is it? No, it's not. Okay. Final thoughts. Maybe there is more. Like I said, sometimes people who are pessimistic, they call themselves realistic. I may need to evaluate myself. Maybe I'm a bit too pessimistic as well.
All right. With that, be an optimist. Be a realist optimist, right? Not a blind optimist. So with that, be like Soichiro and don't if you have the CO disease, there is an antidote. And that's self-awareness. So with that, let's end with a little Leaderonomics.com. If you haven't got that, check out Leaderonomics.com and the great articles, videos, and have a fabulous weekend. Bye for now.